It's important we look at the facts.
Why?
Douglas Ross is sounding pretty scared.
I believe in independence.
And he clapped like a seal.
Hello, I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record, and welcome to the latest episode of Planet Holyrood, our new Scottish politics show. Joining me to chew over the latest events are two valued colleagues, Douglas Dickie, content editor of the Scottish Daily Express, and John Ferguson, political editor of the Sunday Mail. Now, last week there was only one political story in town, and that was the SNP leadership, which has been amazing for journalists. Nothing has changed. We had the first SNP hustings last night in Cumbernauld between the three candidates, Humza Yousaf, Kate Forbes and Ash Regan. Now, before we come to the main flashpoints, we're going to discuss a bit of a side story, which was the planned media blackout. You may have read that SNP bosses wanted to bar journalists from attending. This caused a massive backlash. There was a sort of partial U-turn where a handful of journalists were allowed in and they agreed to a live stream. So if I could just come to you first, John, why do you think the SNP made this extraordinary blunder?
I think that it probably had more to do with the SNP being worried about what the media might see of their own membership than what they might see of any of the candidates. I guess it's about not wanting to have your dirty laundry laundered in public. They would just rather keep this stuff behind closed doors because there's a chance that you could have candidates falling out, and also potentially seeing the SNP members disagreeing on some of the really big questions that the SNP face, potentially showing their discontent at the lack of progress on independence. I think there's a few reasons why the SNP hierarchy might have wanted this behind closed doors. I think that there's generally just a bit of a hostility towards the media of the SNP. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know. If you've been in touch with our press office over the last few weeks, you'll know that they can sometimes be quite difficult to deal with. They feel like we're out to get them, and I think for all those reasons they would have rather kept this behind closed doors. They'll be aware of the fact that they've got another 8 events coming up, and you have to think that a few of those there's going to be the potential for at least a few embarrassing incidents.
Douglas, I'll just read you the first question at the SNP hustings. It was really charming. What will the candidates do to counter the misinformation, lies and antipathy aimed at our party on a daily basis by journalists based in Scotland? I'm kind of presuming that person's not an Express reader.
I wouldn't think so, no. What I actually found most interesting about that is that the candidates didn't, distance themselves from that view. They all seemed, I think Humza called it, an excellent first question, or a very good first question, and I think that shows that these kind of opinions aren't just held with a kind of rank and file. Another thing I'll say about the whole kind of media ban is I think maybe they were trying to do us a favour, because if that's what we've got to put up with for another 8, hustings, it just highlights, as John said, it highlights how poor the candidates are, and that the what the party members want to focus on isn't what the rest of the country wants to focus on. And I think it's a reminder as well that this is an SNP leadership contest rather than just a contest to be First Minister. And I think the basic fact is that they wanted to be able to have these discussions without being embarrassed. Maybe they wanted to talk about us behind their back. They obviously weren't able to do that. So, just the whole thing was a complete embarrassment for them. The irony being that they've probably wanted to stop themselves from being embarrassed, and yet by doing it, that's the very thing that's happened.
Now, if we focus on the content, what was discussed at the hustings, it was all very polite. The candidates didn't really attack each other. There was one moment, though, when an SNP member asked about faith and whether that would stop someone from reaching the top. clearly a reference to Kate Forbes. And then Humza in his answer shoehorned in a defence of LGBT rights, which was a pretty unsubtle dig at Kate saying that she would not have supported same-sex marriage had she been an MSP in 2014. What did you make of that, John? Was it fair game? And it didn't seem to ruffle Kate Forbes much.
Yeah, I think Kate's surprised everybody by the way she's come back from this. She was obviously, last week it looked like she was potentially down and out as a result of her comments that she wouldn't have voted for equal marriage. This week she's right back in it and looks like she's could easily win this competition. I spoke to one SNP insider who said what this shows you is that Scotland's quite a socially conservative place, and really she was probably just reflecting the views that a lot of people have. I think that it was a dangerous one for Humza to pick her up on, given that it's since emerged he himself didn't vote for equal marriage in the final vote in Holyrood. But I think both of them have difficulties with this. Kate seems to be, her position seems to be, I will defend your rights to the hilt, but you wouldn't have got them if I was in charge, which, I think there's problems with that. Equally, Humza seems to, the argument he's putting forward that he is a devout Muslim, but he's able to separate that from what I think he used the term, what is in the interests of the country. I don't know if that makes so much sense. He seems to be saying things that my religion may find to be immoral might be in the interests of the wider public. So I think it's an interesting one. If you remember back to when Tim Farron, the Lib Dem leader, found himself in a similar pickle, he was repeatedly asked whether gay sex was a sin. And ultimately, this led to him losing his job. And I guess that's the kind of gets to the nub of this. It's just to what extent can you really separate someone's religious beliefs from their politics? I'd agree that was about the only time we really saw anything that had any glimmer of a bit of needle in it in this debate. And I don't think we've seen the last of it.
Douglas, Humza didn't mention the same-sex marriage issue by accident. He was clearly looking for an opportunity to come in on that, and he used the faith question. How much of not a winning issue, but how much of a strong issue is that for him in this contest, do you think?
I think what it highlights is that certain people believe it maybe comes down to what you think the role of the First Minister is. And I think, Mr. Youssef seems to think it's to be a symbol, it's to be a focal point for Scotland in a similar way to, the way Nicola Sturgeon kind of presented herself. And I think that will play well with a lot of SNP members. I think it will play less well with the public, who are looking for a First Minister who wants to get public services working, who wants to be able to deliver ferries on time. So really, you've got kind of two roles. And for me, what Mr. Youssef was doing there is he was pitching directly at the SNP. Well, obviously it was an SNP hustings, but it was a direct pitch to the SNP membership rather than the country. Who, if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think really care that much about Kate Forbes' religious beliefs. I think that most people believe she's got a right to hold them, even if they might personally disagree with them. Kate Forbes has been quite clear that she wouldn't let that get in the way of how she would, potentially run government. So to me, it kind of stunk of grandstanding on Humza's point. I think John also made the point about his own issues with, single-sex marriage, having missed the vote. It almost felt like he was trying a bit too hard to kind of re-emphasise these progressive ideals that he claims to have. But I just think most importantly, as it showed that he can't he obviously feels he can't beat Kate Forbes' incompetency, which he's absolutely correct about. But if he can pitch to this kind of idea of being a progressive symbol, then that might play well amid, with certain sections of the SNP membership.
Aren't you downplaying it as an issue, though, Douglas? I mean, imagine you're a gay Scot and you're in a same-sex marriage, and you're hearing the person that wants to be First Minister saying that, well, if I'd been an MSP, I wouldn't have allowed you to marry your partner, marry your loved one. I mean, isn't that just like deeply insulting? Particularly if you're a member of the SNP and you've got a vote in this. It's insulting and it's hurtful.
Well, obviously I can't, put myself in that, in that position. But I think that most people want to see at the top of government as competency, and I'm sure there's other people in government who, might feel the same way as Kate Forbes. I think it's also important to point out that Kate Forbes' opinions and beliefs are hardly secret. People, I've certainly speculated on them, and I'm sure behind closed doors knew. Yet no one really had a problem with it. While she was, finance minister, there seems to be less anger at the person who gave her, a top job in government when she was obviously holding these beliefs, which I personally think are really outdated. So I just think, as you say, it might play well with the SNP membership, but I think if you ask the average punter on the street, I don't think it's going to make a big difference. And we noticed even when there was a first poll of SNP members came out last week, even after she said that, she was still leading. Now I can understand why some people might find it hurtful. But the simple fact is what this country needs is someone who's going to come in and be competent. Now, obviously, I wouldn't want, Humza Yousaf, Kate Forbes, or Ash Regan to be First Minister. I'd prefer it with someone else for another party. But
like who would you prefer?
Well, obviously, I'd like to see Douglas Ross as First Minister. But that's
just to hold you there, John. Do you agree? Douglas Ross as First Minister, would that be good for Scotland?
No, I think that would be a terrible idea. This is something that's not really been highlighted as the amount of Tories that actually voted against equal marriage as well. I think the big mistake that Kate made on this was to specifically say she wouldn't have voted for it. I think that if she had just said that was a vote that happened at another time, I can't consider, the circumstances around that. I can't really comment on how I would have voted now. These are my religious beliefs, but I would have taken a more considered, wider view had I been faced with that vote. I think that would be a much more sensible thing for her to do. But I think Douglas is right. People in general, I think, are more interested in other things. I think I think to some extent, people in the wider public are of the opinion that everybody has their rights now and we should be focusing on other things. Humza spoke quite a lot about extending rights where possible, and I guess that's when this issue bleeds into the trans issue and the feeling that some people have that this stuff's gone too far now. We're past peak rights and we're beginning to give out rights that are potentially questionable.
It wasn't quite a love-in at the hustings, but there was a lot of agreement on a range of issues and they were all very polite. John, who do you think came out best in it in terms of who would the members look at and think, yeah, I was on the fence, but I might go for that person?
I think that there's been a lot of, if you look on Twitter, you would think that you were faced with three absolute no-hopers here. And I think the truth is that that all of the candidates have their own strengths and weaknesses. I think you can tell that that Humza and Kate Forbes have a bit more media experience. They're a bit more polished. And I think both of them came across quite well. I think Ash she's got is a bit more of a difficult sell. She's presenting herself as the kind of anti-establishment candidate, the non-business as usual candidate, and that's more difficult. You've got to explain a wider, bigger vision for the future. But I think look on the face of it, looking at the performance there, I think I would say perhaps Kate edged it.
How about you, Douglas? Who do you think would be, of the three candidates, who will be best pleased?
I think out of the three, I think Humza will be best pleased, because he was able at one point to kind of turn onto those issues that are so important in terms of being a leader. I think he made the point, John, that he wanted to be, first activist as well as just first minister. And I think in that sense, by being able to, concentrate on issues like single-sex marriage, he would have been able to successfully do that to more members than maybe Kate Forbes. I think as well he benefited greatly from being in the west of Scotland, which is a bit more his turf. I think we might see Kate Forbes and Ash Regan grow into it a bit more in terms of winners and losers. Humza maybe edges it, but I think Scotland's going to be the loser out of it. So because right now it's been very light on policy, but big on kind of message. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of develop going forward.
Let's talk about the outsider candidate, Ash Regan, who quit her ministerial post last year in protest over the gender recognition reforms. Now, Ash unveiled her currency plan yesterday. Now, just to give a bit of context, the SNP's current policy is roughly that in an independent Scotland, they would keep sterling for a number of years before gradually moving to a new independent currency. Ash said yesterday that an independent Scotland would only have to keep sterling for, wait for it, a few months, and that the devolved Parliament would do the running in terms of setting up an independent central bank for monetary policy. So, John, is this a genius idea that basically solves the SNP's currency problems, or is it a bonkers plan that should be widely mocked and ridiculed?
It's interesting. I think it's not a million miles away from what the plan is at the moment. Nicola Sturgeon was clear that ultimately we needed to have our own currency, but I think she was realistic that was going to take quite a bit of time and quite a bit of, it was a very complex thing to set up. So I think the idea that could be done within a few months is probably hugely optimistic. But then she was saying that this new currency would come in within months of Scotland becoming independent. I think when I had a look at the economic plan that she referenced there, and it suggests that if independence was declared in September this year, then by 2025 you could be looking at the introduction of a new currency. So I think it's I guess anything's possible, but it certainly seems highly unlikely that this could be done in that kind of time scale. And I think there's for a party that seems to be struggling to be able to build two ferries or successfully implement a deposit return scheme. I think introducing it, I think a lot of people would be sceptical about their ability to introduce a new currency. It's obviously a massively complex and expensive thing to do. You have to set up a new central bank. You need to have something akin to the Bank of England's monetary policy committee that would set interest rates. You need to decide whether you're going to peg that new currency to another currency or whether it's going to float. You have to try everybody's wages and pensions and all the rest of it would need to transfer over into this new denomination. So I think it's anything's possible, but I think it's a dangerous policy to present, because she's now going to have to answer a lot of really difficult questions about exactly how that would operate. I think that playing a slightly longer game on that one might have been advantageous.
Douglas, I mean, how would you describe it? Is it an oven-ready currency plan, or is it something that's half-baked?
I think it's back of the fag packet Reaganomics, to be honest. So, as John said, they can't even produce 2 ferries in time, yet we're meant to believe that within months of a hypothetical independence event, that they're going to have a new currency up and running. I think what Ash Regan is doing is she's trying to pitch herself to the more extremist camp. We've already seen some of the people her campaign's been linked to, such as Alex Salmond. She wants to differentiate herself from the more, the perceived gradualist approach taken by, Nicola Sturgeon. But to me, it just reeks of a desperate attempt by someone who deep down probably knows that they can't win. So they want to try and make themselves
profile
stand
racing,
out.
is it?
Sorry?
Is it profile racing, do you think? Maybe try and get...
Yes, I think so. I think maybe she's got half an eye on the next SNP leadership contest, which I think will be a lot sooner. Well, actually, the last one, we've not had one since 2004, but it will certainly be a lot sooner than the gap between Nicola Sturgeon taking over and Nicola Sturgeon leaving office. So I think that is what it is. It kind of reminds me of these guys who go on about, UDI and stuff like that, just declaring independence. And she's already kind of went down that route with, 50+1 at any referendum, a never-endum. To be honest, it's just, and I think deep down she'll know that, that's just ridiculous. What she's proposing is just absolutely ridiculous.
All right, let's just change the subject from the SNP contest. Let's focus on the deposit return scheme. So for anyone who's not familiar with this, basically under the scheme, people will pay a 20p deposit when they buy a drink that comes in a single-use container. They'll get their money back when they return the container to one of tens of thousands of return points. But it seems like this scheme has turned into a bit of a disaster. Only a small number of producers have signed up. They think that it's going to damage their businesses. And the SNP candidates in the contest are calling for a rethink. And the Minister, Lorna Slater, is under real pressure. John, how dangerous is this for the Scottish Government just now?
I think it's really, it's potentially a huge crisis in the making for them. But there was some interesting, Lorna Slater said yesterday, don't worry, 90% of all of the drinks by volume that are sold are now signed up to this, but it's then been highlighted that actually only includes about 600 producers of a potential 4,500. So what it suggests is that while the huge multinational companies that can implement this stuff have moved into line, thousands of small producers haven't, and that's potentially incredibly damaging. One of the ironies of this is that a lot of these small producers are the microbreweries and all of that the Scottish Government have pumped millions of pounds into through Scottish Enterprise over the last few years. They've really actively encouraged this as an industry, and it's become an incredibly successful industry. So to refuse to listen to their legitimate concerns and say this is happening by a certain date seems pretty crazy. I suspect it is going to be rolled back in some way by whoever wins this leadership election. And I think the other thing that it highlights is that all of the policies that seem to be getting the SNP into trouble are the policies that are being championed by the Green Party, who they're in coalition with. And I think it probably doesn't bode well for how that coalition is going to fare in the future.
Douglas, the Minister Lorna Slater is a Green. She seems to be struggling on this. See if she'd been an SNP minister, do you think she would have been out at the next reshuffle?
I would, yeah. Well, I mean, what we've seen from the SNP is that they do tend to reward failure. I mean, Humza Yousaf has failed at transport, he's failed at justice, he's failed at health, and now we're sitting here with a very real prospect that he could get, the keys to Beauty House. So I really don't think she would be under threat. She should be under threat. Her job's completely untenable. She's shown a real arrogance, refusal to listen to the concerns, the very real concerns of businesses. Funny enough, even today for FMQs, Nicola Sturgeon is still defending the scheme. It's just absolutely beyond me why anyone thinks this is a good idea right now. That's not to say it's not a good idea in theory. We're in the midst of a cost of living crisis. These businesses have already had COVID. They've already, had increased energy bills to deal with. And now Lorna Slater wants to push this on them. And the fact is, it isn't going to come in August. I don't know anyone who thinks it is. And yet Lorna Slater just wants to keep railroading this through. I noticed as well a tweet from another Green MSP today, taking the mickey out of Innocent Gun. These are Scottish businesses that we should be supporting. The government we should be supporting. We shouldn't be mocking them on social media. It's just been a complete omnishambles ever since she's come into this role. It's a role that's far too big for her, and she should absolutely go.
Okay, let's turn to Tweet of the Week. This is where our two guests produce their favourite tweet of the last few days. John, let's start with you. What have you got for us?
So I chose this one, Paul, because you're name checked, and it's a tweet from the blogger Craig Murray, who's seems to have taken extreme exception to your exclusive highlighting some of Hub's policies on free childcare if he's to become First Minister. Craig Murray tweeted, "Forget independence. Have this shiny, empty promise from your corrupt devolutionist candidate, as written up by the most disgusting unionist journalist in Scotland." Quite extraordinary. The reason I chose this is because I think it just sums up where this attitude towards the media that we've seen over the last couple of days, and the media blackout of the hustings, where that kind of attitude comes from. And you really do think, what do you need to do to please some people? You've written a story there that is entirely factual. It's reflected a policy announcement by an SNP minister who's running to be First Minister. Is actually a very positive policy announcement, and yet you've been called a disgusting unionist for writing about it. So I think that shows just how off the scale odd some of this criticism of the media has become. And I agree with Douglas that it would have been good to have seen some of the candidates actually challenge that perception that journalists are all lying and out to get them and spreading disinformation when they were asked about this at the hustings.
Yeah, it'd be fair to say Craig Murray and I are not close. I actually sent that tweet to an MSP, and I said, "How does he know that I'm disgusting?" And the MSP said, "Maybe he's met you." So, such is life.
There might be a few on the Express. I'm saying there might be a few on the Express. I'm jealous of that description of you, Paul. So
it was surprisingly spicy, but free speech and all that.
Absolutely.
So what have you got, Douglas? What's your tweet of the week?
So I've picked an account called Mercurius, which uses videos and clips to mock the SNP as well as hold them to account. Some of their videos are quite serious and serious matters, but some of them are undeniably quite funny. And I'm a bit of a Father Ted fan myself, so I was quite taken with one this week they done up, which uses a famous scene of Father Ted trying to explain the concept of perspective to Father Dougal, using the toy cows. You know, the ones in here are small, the ones outside are far away. But instead of Father Dougal, we've got Ash Regan trying to explain her 50+1 de facto referendum plan, which isn't a de facto referendum plan. It particularly focuses on when she was questioned, what will you do if Westminster simply says no, of which she, of course, had an absolutely nonsense answer. She's certainly taken that forward this week with her currency plans, and I think it goes back to what I was saying, is Ash Regan is very much in this contest, I think, to get her name out there. Until this happened, she was just known as that minister who stepped down because of, you know, transgender laws, or proposed transgender laws.
I think we can all agree that Ash has made an impression this week, no doubt about it.
She has absolutely made an impression. Whether that's a good one or not, I guess we'll find out on the 27th of March.
Okay, just final bit. Good week, bad week. Let's start with you, John. Who are you picking?
So I think it's been a good week, undeniably, from Kate Forbes. She looked down and out last week after her, you know, in her very first interview, when she said that she wouldn't have voted for equal marriage, but she seems to have really come back into it this week. I think that, you know, when she was talking about the bottle return scheme, and she talked about the fact that we really need to be careful with the economy at the moment. A lot of businesses are struggling, and, you know, if we don't have a strong economy, we can't do anything about poverty and all of these other things. You know, I think that's something that will really chime with a lot of voters and a lot of SNP members who would like to see the focus of the Scottish government return to the economy and move away from social issues. So I think she's definitely been had a very good week. In terms of who's had a bad week, I think Matt Hancock, the former UK Health Secretary's had a terrible week. It's emerged that
when was the last time he had a good week? He never has a good week, that guy. Every week's a bad
when
week.
He's in the jungle. He's all right when he's in the jungle.
I suppose when
I think
the events in the jungle, that would have been a good week.
I think the events of the last week really highlight just how bad this guy's judgment really is. He gave all of his WhatsApps to one of the most cutthroat journalists in Britain, Isabel Oakeshott, and he's now seems surprised that she's given them all to the Telegraph, and this is turning out to have been incredibly bad for him. So, you know, I think everybody had wondered up until now how he could have been so stupid as to allow all of these people to come in and make millions out of PPE and COVID testing facilities. I think this really gives you an insight into his judgment.
Yeah, I mean, look, what sort of a moron hands over his WhatsApp messages to anybody? Why would you do that? I just don't understand that. Anyway, Douglas, over to you. Good week, bad week?
Good week. I think it's been a good week for Rishi Sunak. He's finally got Brexit done.
Has he?
Sorry?
Has he? He's finally got Brexit done.
He's obviously got this new deal with the EU, which will help trade into Northern Ireland. It seems to have gone down surprisingly well, even across the political divide. I was hearing even the SDLP seemed they obviously had a few concerns, but most people seem to be positive for it. I think we'll get it through Parliament quite easy, despite suggestions that backbenchers might try and stop at it. I realise people, it's going to open up the debate about, if not Northern Ireland, then or if Northern Ireland, why not Scotland? I think people need to realise that it's two completely conflicting situations. We've also got 100 years of bloodshed on the island of Ireland up until kind of 1998, and just in the last 2 weeks we've been reminded that there's still the potential there. So I think it's been a good week for Rishi. For bad week, I'm going to go for Orna Slater. The only issue is I think Orna Slater probably lacks the self-awareness to realise that she's had a bad week. She probably thinks things are going swimmingly, but I suspect in a few months we'll look back and see this week as the beginning of the end as her time as a government minister. It's also been a bad week for all the retailers who are going to pay the price for her folly, if indeed it is. It does kind of go through in August, but so that's my picks.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. So I think that brings the latest episode of Planet Holyrood to a close. Hope you've enjoyed our contributions, and we'd be delighted if you're to join us next week as well. So thanks again.
It's important we look at the facts.
Why?
Douglas Ross is sounding pretty scared.
I believe in independence. And he clapped like a seal.